When a homeless veteran with severe facial scars sits down for a simple cup of coffee, a cruel businessman's vicious insults about his appearance turn the entire diner silent with shock. But when a trucker at the counter suddenly stands up and speaks 6 powerful words, everything changes in ways no one could have predicted. But what could those 6 words possibly be that would transform this moment of cruelty into something extraordinary? My stomach was making loud noises as I walked down the snowy street. I hadn't eaten anything real in 3 whole days. Just some old crackers I found in a trash can behind the gas station. The cold December wind cut right through my torn army jacket like a knife. Every step hurt because my old boots had holes in them that let the freezing water soak into my socks. I stopped in front of Murphy's Diner and looked through the foggy window. Warm light spilled out onto the sidewalk where I stood shivering. Inside, I could see families eating hot food and laughing together. Steam rose from their coffee cups. My mouth watered just watching them. But I knew what would happen when I walked in there. It always happened. People would stare at my face. They couldn't help it. The scars from the bomb explosion in Afghanistan covered the left side of my face like melted plastic. Sometimes little kids would point and ask their parents what happened to me. The parents would quickly pull them away and whisper for them to stop looking. I understood. I probably would have stared too before this happened to me. I touched the scars gently with my gloved hand. The doctors at the Army hospital had done their best, but there was only so much they could fix. The explosion had been so hot that it melted part of my skin. They said I was lucky to be alive. Most days, I wasn't sure if lucky was the right word. My reflection in the diner window showed a man I barely recognized anymore. Before the war, I had been Danny Martinez, high school football star from Texas. Girls used to say I was handsome. Now I was just another homeless veteran that people crossed the street to avoid. My dark hair was long and messy because I couldn't afford haircuts. My clothes were dirty because the shelter only let you shower twice a week. But I was so hungry that I didn't care about the stairs anymore. I had exactly $5.37 in my pocket. Enough for 1 cup of coffee if I was lucky. Maybe if I sat quietly in the corner, nobody would bother me. Maybe I could make that coffee last for an hour and feel warm for a little while. I pushed open the heavy glass door and felt the blessed heat hit my frozen face. The smell of bacon and eggs made my stomach cramp with hunger. A little bell rang above my head, and several people looked up from their meals. I saw their faces change when they noticed my scars. Some looked away quickly. Others kept staring like I was some kind of animal in a zoo. The diner was busy for Tuesday morning. Most of the customers looked like regular working people grabbing breakfast before their jobs. There were construction workers in dirty clothes, office workers in suits, and a few elderly couples sharing the morning paper. In the corner sat a woman with 2 small children who immediately hid behind their mother when they saw me. I found an empty booth in the back corner and slid onto the cracked leather seat. It felt so good to sit down somewhere warm. My whole body ached from sleeping on the concrete under the highway bridge. The cardboard I used as a mattress didn't do much to soften the hard ground. Every morning, I woke up with new pains in places I didn't know could hurt. A waitress with kind eyes and graying hair approached my table. Her name tag said Sarah. She looked like somebody's grandmother, the type who might make you cookies and ask about your day. Most waitresses in places like this treated me like dirt, but Sarah smiled like she actually cared. "Morning, honey," she said softly, already pouring coffee into a white mug without me asking. "Cream and sugar?" "Just black, please," I said, surprised by how rough my voice sounded. I hadn't talked to anyone in 2 days. "How much for just the coffee?" Sarah glanced around the diner, then leaned closer and whispered, "Don't worry about it right now, sweetheart. You just warm up." She patted my shoulder gently before walking away. It was the first kind touch I'd felt in months, and I had to blink back tears. The coffee was hot and strong, burning my tongue in the best possible way. I wrapped my scarred hands around the warm mug and felt some life come back into my frozen fingers. For the first time in days, I felt almost human again. The simple act of sitting in a warm place with hot coffee felt like luxury. At the counter, a big man in a trucker's cap was eating a plate of eggs and hash browns. He looked like he could be around 40, with thick arms and calloused hands that showed he worked hard for a living. His flannel shirt was clean but worn, and his jeans had honest dirt stains on them. Something about him reminded me of the good sergeants I'd served with overseas. The kind of man who kept his word and looked out for his soldiers. The trucker glanced over at me once, but not in the disgusted way most people did. His look was different, almost like he was studying me, trying to figure something out. Then he went back to his breakfast without making me feel uncomfortable. I appreciated that more than he could know. I took another sip of coffee and tried to make it last. This was probably the best part of my day, and I wanted it to go slowly. Outside the window, snow was starting to fall harder. I dreaded going back out into that cold, but I couldn't stay here forever. Eventually, someone would complain about me being here, and I'd have to leave. But for now, I was warm, and that was enough. I had been sitting quietly for about 10 minutes when I heard the loud voice from the booth behind me. Can you believe they let people like that in here? The man's words hit me like a slap across the face. I knew he was talking about me without even turning around. It's disgusting, the voice continued. It belonged to a man who sounded like he was used to getting his way. I'm trying to eat breakfast, and I have to look at that burned-up face. It's enough to make you sick. My hand started shaking around my coffee cup. Not from the cold this time, but from shame and anger. I wanted to disappear into the floor. This was exactly what I had been afraid would happen. But I was so tired and hungry that I couldn't make myself stand up and leave. Maybe you should eat somewhere else, said another voice. Probably the first man's friend. They both laughed like they had said something funny. But there was nothing funny about it to me. Their words felt like knives cutting into my chest. I turned slightly and saw the man who was talking. He was wearing an expensive-looking gray suit with a shiny watch that probably cost more than I had seen in the last year. His hair was perfectly styled, and his shoes looked like they had never touched dirt. Everything about him screamed money and power. His friend was dressed similarly, both of them looking like they had never missed a meal in their lives. Probably some homeless drug addict, the man in the suit continued, getting louder. Look at those dirty clothes. I bet he hasn't showered in weeks. This is exactly what's wrong with this country. These people think they can go anywhere they want. Sarah the waitress heard him talking and gave me an apologetic look. I could tell she wanted to say something to defend me, but she probably needed this job too much to risk it. I understood. People like that man in the suit could probably get her fired with one phone call. The man wasn't finished, though. He turned in his seat, so he was facing me directly. Hey, buddy, he called out loudly enough for the whole diner to hear. Don't you think you should find someplace more appropriate to hang out? This is a family restaurant. Every person in the diner was now looking at me. I felt my face burning with embarrassment under the scars. The two little children with their mother were staring with wide eyes. An elderly couple at a nearby table shook their heads and whispered to each other. I wanted to crawl under the table and hide. I'm not bothering anyone, I said quietly, hoping he would just leave me alone. But speaking up was a mistake. Not bothering anyone, the man laughed harshly. Look around. Everyone's staring at your face. You're making people lose their appetite. Do you think that's fair to the other customers who actually pay for their food? His words cut deep because part of me wondered if he was right. Maybe I didn't belong here. Maybe I should just stick to fast food places and gas stations where nobody cared what you looked like as long as you had money. James, maybe you should keep it down, his friend said nervously, glancing around at the other customers who were starting to look uncomfortable with the situation. But James wasn't backing down. He seemed to be enjoying the attention. No, I think this is important. We work hard for our money, and we deserve to eat in peace without having to look at. He waved his hand in my direction like I was a piece of trash. That's when I noticed the big trucker at the counter had stopped eating. His fork was halfway to his mouth, but he had gone completely still. He was listening to every word, and something about his posture had changed. His shoulders were tense, and his jaw was clenched tight. What happened to your face anyway? James asked me directly. Drug lab explosion? House fire? Let me guess, you were probably doing something illegal when it happened. I felt tears starting to burn my eyes. Not just from his cruel words, but from the memories they brought back. The smell of smoke and burning metal. The screaming of my fellow soldiers. The moment when everything went white and the pain started. I was serving my country, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. James burst out laughing like I had told the funniest joke he'd ever heard. Oh, this is rich. Now he's claiming to be a war hero. What's next? I'm going to tell us you won medals. His laughter was like acid being poured on my wounds. Other customers were looking away now, embarrassed by the scene he was making. But nobody was standing up for me. Nobody was telling him to stop. I was completely alone, just like always. You know what I think? James said, standing up from his booth and taking a step toward me. I think you're a liar and a fraud. Real soldiers don't end up homeless on the streets. Real soldiers get help from the government. You're probably just some drug addict with a sob story. The room was spinning around me. I felt like I might throw up or pass out. This was worse than any physical pain I had ever experienced. At least when the bomb went off, I lost consciousness quickly. This humiliation just kept going and going. Why don't you just admit what you really are? James pressed on. You're a waste of space who thinks the world owes you something. Well, newsflash, nobody cares about your problems. That's when I saw the trucker at the counter slowly turn around on his stool. His face was hard as stone, and his eyes were fixed on James like a hawk watching a mouse. Something about the way he moved reminded me of soldiers I'd served with. There was a controlled danger in his movements that made the hair on my neck stand up. The trucker's hands were clenched into fists, and I could see tattoos on his arms that looked military. He was studying James with the kind of cold calculation that meant trouble was coming. But James was too busy enjoying his performance to notice the storm gathering behind him. The trucker's chair made a loud scraping noise as he stood up from the counter. Every person in the diner turned to look at him. He was even bigger than I thought, probably 6 feet tall and built like he could lift a car engine with his bare hands. His boots hit the floor with heavy thuds as he walked toward our corner of the restaurant. James was still laughing at his own cruel jokes about me when the trucker stopped right behind him. You got something to say, big guy? James asked without turning around, thinking he was so clever. Don't tell me you're friends with a burned victim here. The trucker didn't answer right away. He just stood there like a mountain, his presence filling the whole space around us. I could see the muscles in his arms tense up under his flannel shirt. There were definitely tattoos peeking out from his sleeves, and now I was sure they were military ones. Turn around when you're talking to me, the trucker said in a voice that was quiet but dangerous. It was the kind of voice that made smart people stop what they were doing and pay attention. James finally turned around, and I saw his confident smile fade a little when he realized how big this man was. Look, I don't want any trouble, James said, but he was trying to sound tough. I'm just pointing out that some people don't belong in decent places. This is a family restaurant, not a homeless shelter. The trucker took one step closer to James. What's your name? He asked. What's it matter to you? James shot back, but I could hear his voice getting a little higher. His friend was tugging on his sleeve, trying to get him to sit back down and be quiet. I asked you a question, the trucker said. His voice was still calm, but there was something underneath it that made my skin prickle. It reminded me of the way my drill sergeant used to talk right before someone got in serious trouble. James, he finally answered. James Patterson. And you are? Jake Morrison, the trucker said. Then he looked straight at me for the first time since this whole thing started. His eyes were blue-gray like storm clouds, and when they met mine, I felt something strange happen in my chest. Like recognition, but that was impossible. I'd never seen this man before in my life. What's your name, son? Jake asked me gently. His voice was completely different when he talked to me, soft and respectful. Danny, I managed to whisper. Danny Martinez. Jake's face went completely white when I said my name. He stared at me so hard that I thought he might be having some kind of medical emergency. His mouth opened and closed like he was trying to say something but couldn't find the words. Wait a minute, Jake said slowly. Danny Martinez? From Texas. I nodded, confused about how this stranger could possibly know where I was from. How do you? But Jake wasn't listening to me anymore. He was staring at my face, not at the scars, but like he was trying to see through them to something underneath. His hands started shaking, and he had to grab the back of James's chair to steady himself. This can't be happening, Jake whispered to himself. After all these years, James was getting impatient with being ignored. Hey, are we done here? I'd like to finish my breakfast in peace. Jake spun around so fast that James jumped backward. You want peace? Jake's voice was getting louder now. You want to talk about peace while you're attacking a man who sacrificed everything for your freedom? I don't know what you're talking about, James said, but he was definitely nervous now. Other customers were putting down their forks and paying attention to what was happening. You called him a liar, Jake said, pointing at me. You said real soldiers don't end up homeless. You want to know what real soldiers do? Jake rolled up his left sleeve, revealing a tattoo that made my heart stop. It was the 101st Airborne patch, the same unit I had served with in Afghanistan. Below it were dates that I recognized, and below there were names. Names of soldiers who had died overseas. Real soldiers watch their friends die, Jake said, his voice cracking with emotion. Real soldiers come home broken and get forgotten by the system they served. Real soldiers end up on the streets because the government that sent them to war doesn't know how to fix what war does to people. James was backing away now, probably realizing he had picked the wrong fight. But Jake wasn't done with him yet. You see these scars on his face? Jake continued, gesturing toward me. You think those came from some drug lab? Those are shrapnel scars. I've seen them before. I've got some of my own. He rolled up his other sleeve, showing more tattoos and several long, thin scars running up his forearm. Kandahar Province, 2018. Roadside bomb. Killed 3 good men and wounded 5 others. My whole world tilted sideways when he said those words. Kandahar Province, 2018. That was exactly where and when I got hurt. The date was burned into my memory forever. It was the day my life ended and this nightmare began. You were there? I asked, my voice barely working. Jake looked at me with tears in his eyes. I was there, Danny. I was right there. The diner had gone completely silent. Even the kitchen staff had stopped cooking to listen. James was standing frozen like a statue, probably wishing he had never gotten out of bed this morning. I don't understand, I said. I would remember you. You were unconscious when they pulled you out, Jake said softly. There was so much blood and smoke. Everything was chaos. They airlifted you out before I could. He stopped talking and wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. I looked for you, Danny. When I got back to base, I tried to find out what happened to you. But they said you've been transferred to Germany, then back to the States. I tried to track you down through the VA, but I fell through the cracks. I finished for him. The paperwork got lost. My benefits got delayed. I ended up on the streets, waiting for help that never came. Jake's face was full of pain and anger, but not at me. At the system that had failed us both. I'm so sorry, brother. I should have tried harder to find you. James tried to sneak away during our conversation, but Jake's voice stopped him cold. Where do you think you're going? Jake's massive hand landed on James's shoulder, stopping him from leaving. We're not finished talking yet, he said in that same quiet, dangerous voice that had made everyone in the diner go silent. Look, I think there's been a misunderstanding, James stammered, trying to pull away. But Jake's grip was like a steel clamp. I didn't know he was really a veteran. If I had known. If you had known what? Jake interrupted. You would have treated him like a human being? You think you get to decide who deserves respect based on their story? James's face was turning red, but not from embarrassment. He was getting angry that some truck driver was talking to him like this. Let go of me right now, or I'm calling the police. You can't just grab people. Go ahead and call them, Jake said calmly. I'd love to explain to the officers how you were verbally attacking a disabled veteran. I'm sure they'll be very interested in hearing about that. Sarah, the waitress, had been watching everything from behind the counter. Now she came over with a phone in her hand. I already called them, she said firmly. I told them we had a customer harassing other people and causing a disturbance. James's eyes went wide. You called the cops on me? I'm the victim here. This maniac grabbed me. I saw the whole thing, said an elderly man from a nearby table. You were being cruel to that young man for no reason. The trucker was just defending him. We all saw it, added a woman with 2 children. You should be ashamed of yourself, picking on someone who's obviously been through enough. More customers started speaking up, all of them taking my side. I couldn't believe it. For months, I'd felt invisible and worthless. Now all these strangers were standing up for me against a man in an expensive suit. James realized he was outnumbered and tried a different approach. Okay, maybe I was a little harsh, but you have to understand, I was just trying to enjoy my breakfast. It's not my fault if seeing certain things makes people uncomfortable. Certain things? Jake's voice was getting louder and more dangerous. You mean American heroes who got wounded serving their country? I mean people who don't take care of themselves? James shot back, his true feelings coming out. If he's really a veteran, where are his benefits? Why isn't the government taking care of him? Something doesn't add up. I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. These are the same questions I asked myself every day. Why had the system failed me? Why was I living on the streets while other veterans got help? You want to know why? Jake said, his voice shaking with rage. Because the VA is broken. Because men like Danny come home with invisible wounds that don't show up on medical reports. Because PTSD and depression don't get you benefits as fast as missing limbs do. Jake turned to look at me, and I saw understanding in his eyes. How long have you been waiting for your disability rating, Danny? 3 years, I whispered. They keep saying they need more paperwork, more medical exams, more proof that my injuries are service-connected. 3 years, Jake repeated, turning back to James. This man has been waiting 3 years for help he earned with his blood. And you think he's lying because the government is too slow to do its job? James was quiet now, but I could see he still didn't really believe us. He probably thought we were both making everything up. Even if that's true, he said finally, it doesn't give him the right to make other people uncomfortable. That's when Jake did something that shocked everyone in the diner. He pulled out his phone and scrolled through his photos. You want proof? He said. Here's your proof. He turned the phone screen toward James, and I saw a picture that made my knees go weak. It was a photo of a group of soldiers in Afghanistan, all of us dirty and tired, but smiling at the camera. I was in the front row, my face young and unmarked by scars. Jake was standing right behind me, his hand on my shoulder. That's us, Jake said quietly. Alpha Squad, 101st Airborne, taken 2 days before the bombing that gave Danny those scars you find so disgusting. James stared at the photo, his mouth hanging open. You could see that it was really us, just younger and before the war changed everything. This one here, Jake said, pointing to another soldier in the photo, didn't make it home. Neither did this one or this one. Danny and I were the lucky ones. We survived. He swiped to the next photo, and I had to look away. It showed the aftermath of the bomb blast. Twisted metal, smoke, and soldiers lying on the ground. I could see myself in the corner of the picture, my face covered in blood. This is what happened to your drug addict, Jake said to James. He threw himself over me when the shrapnel started flying. Those scars on his face? He got them saving my life. The diner was so quiet you could hear the coffee maker bubbling in the kitchen. James was staring at the photos like he couldn't believe what he was seeing. I don't understand, James said weakly. If you two served together, how come you didn't recognize each other? Jake's face was full of pain when he answered. Because I haven't seen him in 7 years. Because he looks different now. Because war changes people in ways you can't imagine. He turned to me with tears in his eyes. But I should have known. Those eyes, that voice. I should have recognized my brother. That word, brother, hit me like lightning. In the army, we used it for soldiers we trusted with our lives. Soldiers who had your back no matter what. I hadn't heard anyone call me brother in years. Jake, I said, finally remembering where I knew him from. Jake Morrison? You pulled me out of the truck. I tried to, he said, crying now. But you were hurt so bad. There was so much blood. They had to airlift you out before I could even say goodbye. The police sirens were getting louder outside, but nobody in the diner was paying attention to them anymore. We were all focused on 2 broken soldiers finding each other after 7 years of being lost. Jake wiped his eyes and looked straight at James with the kind of stare that could melt steel. The whole diner was holding its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. Outside, the police sirens were getting closer, but Jake didn't seem to care about anything except making sure James understood exactly who he had been attacking. You want to know what real courage looks like? Jake said, his voice carrying across the silent restaurant. It looks like a 22-year-old kid throwing himself between his buddy and a piece of burning metal flying at 60 miles per hour. James was shaking now, still staring at the photos on Jake's phone. The pictures showed everything. The explosion, the wounded soldiers, the chaos of that horrible day. I didn't know, he whispered. You didn't want to know, Jake corrected him. You took one look at a man with scars, and decided he was worthless. You didn't ask questions. You didn't show an ounce of human decency. You just attacked him like some kind of animal. I watched James's face change as the reality of what he had done finally hit him. All his confidence was gone. His expensive suit couldn't protect him from the truth anymore. He looked smaller somehow, like he was shrinking into himself. Danny saved more than just my life that day. Jake continued, putting his phone away. When that bomb went off, our truck flipped over and caught fire. Danny was hurt worse than any of us, bleeding from his head and face, but he still crawled back into that burning metal to pull out Tommy Rodriguez. My heart clenched when Jake said Tommy's name. I remembered Tommy. He was just 18 years old, fresh out of high school in California. He used to show everyone pictures of his girlfriend back home and talk about the ring he was going to buy her. Tommy had a broken leg and couldn't move. Jake went on. The fire was spreading fast. Danny could have run to safety, but he went back for Tommy. That's when the second explosion happened. I closed my eyes, trying not to remember the sound of that second blast. The heat that felt like standing too close to the sun. The way the world went white and then black. The shrapnel from that second explosion is what gave Danny those scars, Jake said to James. Every mark on his face is proof that he valued another person's life more than his own safety. Sarah the waitress had tears running down her cheeks. Other customers were crying too. Even the tough-looking construction workers at the counter were wiping their eyes. "Did Tommy make it?" asked the elderly woman who had defended me earlier. Jake's face got dark. Tommy lived for 3 more days. Long enough to write a letter to his parents thanking Danny for saving him. Long enough to tell us that Danny was the bravest man he ever met. The weight of those words hit me like a truck. I had forgotten about Tommy's letter. The memory had been buried under years of pain and homeless nights, and people like James telling me I was worthless. So when you look at those scars, Jake said to James, his voice getting louder, "You're not looking at some drug addict or criminal. You're looking at the face of a hero who sacrificed everything for people he barely knew." James tried to speak, but Jake held up his hand to stop him. "I'm not done yet," Jake said. "You want to know why Danny is homeless? You want to know why the VA isn't taking care of him? Because the system is broken. Because men like Danny come home with injuries that don't fit into neat little boxes on government forms." Jake pulled up his pant leg, revealing a prosthetic limb where his right leg should have been. Several people in the diner gasped. I lost my leg in that same explosion. But you know what? It was easier for me to get benefits because my injury was obvious. Danny's brain injury, his PTSD, his depression, those things are invisible. The VA doesn't know how to handle invisible wounds. I stared at Jake's prosthetic leg, remembering fragments of that day. Him lying next to me in the dirt, both of us bleeding and broken. The medics working frantically to save us both. For 3 years, Danny has been fighting for the benefits he earned with his blood. Jake continued. 3 years of paperwork and medical exams and bureaucrats who don't understand what war does to people. 3 years of sleeping on the streets while politicians give speeches about supporting our troops. The police officers finally walked through the diner door, but they stopped when they saw what was happening. One of them was an older man with gray hair who looked at Jake's military tattoos and seemed to understand the situation immediately. "Is there a problem here?" the older officer asked. "No problem," Jake said calmly. "Just educating someone about the cost of freedom." James looked at the officers like they were his salvation. "This man assaulted me," he said quickly. "I want to press charges." But the older officer was looking at the photos still displayed on Jake's phone. He studied them carefully, then looked at me and Jake with new respect in his eyes. "Were you both deployed together?" the officer asked. "Afghanistan, 2018, Jake en Suède, 101st Airborne." The officer nodded slowly. "My son served there too. Different unit, same year." He turned to James with a look that could freeze water. "Sir, what exactly happened here?" Before James could lie, Sarah spoke up. This gentleman in the suit was verbally attacking the veteran, making fun of his scars and calling him names. The truck driver was defending him. Several of us saw the whole thing, added the construction worker from the counter. The suit guy was way out of line. James realized he wasn't going to get any sympathy from the police. "Look, maybe I said some things I shouldn't have. but I didn't know he was really a veteran. And that makes it okay? The younger police officer asked. You think it's fine to attack someone as long as they're not military? Jake stepped forward and did something that surprised everyone. Officers, I don't want to press any charges. This man learned something important today. Sometimes education is more valuable than punishment. But Jake wasn't done with James yet. He looked him straight in the eye and said 6 words that would change everything. He took shrapnel meant for me. Those 6 words hung in the air like thunder after lightning. Every person in the diner felt the power of what Jake had just said. James's face went completely white as the full meaning hit him. He had been attacking the very man who had saved Jake's life. What do you mean? James whispered, but I could see in his eyes that he already knew. Jake's voice was steady and strong. I mean that when the shrapnel from that bomb was flying toward my head, Danny saw it coming. He threw himself in front of me and took the metal in his face instead of letting it kill me. The police officers looked at each other with amazement. The older one had been in the military himself, and he understood exactly what that meant. Son, he said to me, that kind of courage doesn't come along very often. I felt embarrassed by all the attention. I just did what anyone would do, I said quietly. No, Jake said firmly. Most people would have run. Most people would have saved themselves. You made a choice to put my life before yours, and you paid for it with your face. James was staring at me now, but not with disgust like before. His look was different, shocked, ashamed, maybe even a little bit afraid. I don't understand, he said. If you save his life, why aren't you being taken care of? Why isn't the government helping you? Jake's laugh was bitter. Because saving lives doesn't show up on government paperwork. Because heroism doesn't qualify you for fast-track benefits. Because the system cares more about forms and signatures than it does about the men who bled for this country. Sarah brought over a fresh pot of coffee and refilled everyone's cups without being asked. Her hands were shaking a little, and I could tell she was still emotional from everything she had heard. How long have you two been looking for each other? She asked. 7 years, Jake said. 7 years of wondering if Danny had made a home. 7 years of trying to track him down through the VA system. They kept telling me he was transferred to different hospitals, different states. The paperwork trail went cold in Georgia. I spent 2 years in VA hospitals, I explained. Brain surgery for the shrapnel, skin grafts for the burns, physical therapy to learn how to walk again. When they finally released me, I had nowhere to go. My family back in Texas thought I was dead. The military had told them I was missing in action. James looked confused. How could your own family think you were dead? Because that's what happens when communication breaks down, Jake answered for me. The military is good at fighting wars, but they're terrible at keeping track of people afterward. Danny fell through the cracks. The younger police officer was writing notes in a small book. Have you tried contacting your family since then? He asked me. I felt my chest tighten with old pain. I tried calling my mother 3 years ago. A stranger answered. They told me she had moved and didn't leave a forwarding address. I think she gave up hope of ever seeing me again. What about other family members? The officer pressed. My father died while I was overseas. My sister moved to Mexico with her husband. I don't even know how to find her. The words came out flat and emotionless, but inside I was screaming. Losing my family had hurt worse than any physical wound. Jake put his hand on my shoulder. Danny, I've been running my own trucking business for 4 years now. I've got government contracts, good money, steady work. I've been looking for a partner I can trust. I looked up at him, not daring to hope. What are you saying? I'm saying you don't have to be homeless anymore. I'm saying the search is over for both of us. James had been listening to everything with growing amazement. You're offering him a job? Just like that. I'm offering him a partnership, Jay corrected. 50-50 split on everything. Danny's got skills the Army taught him, logistics, navigation, equipment maintenance. Plus, I know his character. I know he'll watch my back. The older police officer smiled. Sounds like you boys have some catching up to do. Are we done here with the complaint? James looked around the diner at all the faces staring at him. Everyone was waiting to see what kind of man he really was underneath that expensive suit. Officer, I want to withdraw my complaint. There was no assault. I was wrong about everything. But Jake wasn't ready to let him off that easy. James, I want you to understand something. What you did here today, attacking a veteran, making fun of his scars, that's not just cruel. It's dangerous. What do you mean, dangerous? James asked. I mean that veterans are killing themselves at a rate of 22 per day. 22 per day because they come home to a country that doesn't understand them, doesn't appreciate their sacrifice, and treats them like garbage when they're at their lowest point. The number hit everyone in the diner like a physical blow. 22 veterans every single day. Danny could have been one of those statistics, Jake continued. If he had given up hope, if he had decided the pain was too much to bear, your words today could have been the thing that pushed him over the edge. James looked like he was going to be sick. I never thought about it that way. Most people don't, Jake said. They see a homeless veteran and think failure instead of hero. They see scars and think ugly instead of sacrifice. They make judgments without knowing the story. I watched James struggle with what he was learning. His whole worldview was being turned upside down. Everything he thought he knew about homeless people and veterans was wrong. What can I do? James asked quietly. How do I make this right? Jake looked at me, waiting for my answer. All eyes in the diner were on me now. For the first time in years, I had power in the situation. I could make James pay for what he had done, or I could show him the same mercy that Jake was showing me. Just remember this day, I said finally. Remember that the person you're looking at might be carrying invisible wounds. Remember that kindness costs nothing, but cruelty can destroy lives. James nodded slowly. Then he did something that surprised everyone. He reached into his wallet and pulled out a business card. I own a construction company. If you ever need work, or if you know other veterans who need jobs, call me. I want to do better. Jake took the card and studied it. Patterson Construction. I've heard of your company. We do a lot of government work, James said. Federal buildings, military bases. I never thought about hiring veterans specifically, but maybe I should. The transformation in James was amazing to watch. The cruel, arrogant man from 20 minutes ago was gone. In his place was someone who looked ashamed but determined to change. Outside the diner, the snow was still falling, but it didn't look cold and threatening anymore. It looked clean and peaceful, like the world was getting a fresh start. Jake pulled out his phone and started making a call right there in the diner. Yeah, it's me, he said to whoever answered. I need you to bring the spare truck keys to Murphy's Diner on 5th Street. And call the bank. I need to add someone to the business account today. I stared at him in shock. Jake, you don't have to do this. You don't owe me anything. Don't owe you. Jake's voice cracked with emotion. Danny, you saved my life. Without you, I'd be dead in the ground in Afghanistan. Everything I've built, everything I've accomplished in the last 7 years, none of it would exist without you. The police officers were getting ready to leave, but the older one stopped and shook both our hands. You boys take care of each other, he said. The country needs more stories like this one. James was still sitting at his table, looking like he'd been hit by a truck. His friend had left during all the excitement, probably embarrassed by James's behavior. Now James was alone, staring at his untouched breakfast and thinking about everything he'd learned. I keep thinking about what you said, James told Jake. About 22 veterans killing themselves every day. I had no idea it was that bad. Sarah refilled James's coffee cup, even though he hadn't asked. My nephew came back from Iraq 5 years ago, she said quietly. He's been struggling ever since. Can't keep a job, can't sleep through the night. His wife left him last year. That's the invisible part people don't see, Jake explained. When Danny and I came home, everyone focused on the physical wounds. But the mental ones, the nightmares, the guilt, the feeling like you don't belong in the regular world anymore, those are just as real. I nodded, remembering my own dark nights. There were times I thought about ending it, I admitted. When I was sleeping under bridges in the rain, when people would cross the street to avoid looking at me, when I'd go days without anyone speaking to me like I was human. The diner got quiet again. Even the kitchen staff had stopped cooking to listen. What kept you going? Asked a woman at a nearby table. I thought about it for a moment. Tommy's letter, I said finally. The one Jake mentioned earlier. Before Tommy died, he wrote to his parents about what happened that day. Someone at the VA gave me a copy of it 3 years ago. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper that was worn soft from being read so many times. Tommy wrote, There's a soldier named Danny Martinez who proved that angels exist. He came back into hell to save me when he could have run to safety. If anything happens to me, please find Danny and tell him he's the best man I ever knew." Jake's eyes filled with tears as I read Tommy's words out loud. "You kept that letter all this time?" "It was the only thing that reminded me I used to be worth something," I said. "When the world treated me like garbage, I'd read Tommy's words and remember that once, for a few minutes, I was somebody's hero." James was crying now, and he wasn't trying to hide it. "I almost destroyed you today," he whispered. "If Jake hadn't been here, if he hadn't stopped me, I would have taken away the one thing that was keeping you alive." The weight of what could have happened hit everyone in the room. If Jake hadn't recognized me, if he hadn't stepped in, James's cruel words might have been the final straw that broke me. A pickup truck pulled up outside the diner, and a woman got out carrying a set of keys. She was about 40 years old with short brown hair and kind eyes. Through the window, I could see a big red truck parked behind her. "That's my business partner, Lisa," Jake said. "She helps run the office side of things while I do the driving." Lisa walked into the diner and looked around at all the emotional faces. "What's going on in here?" she asked. "Lisa, meet Danny Martinez," Jake said. "The soldier I've been looking for." Lisa's face lit up with recognition. "Danny? The one from your squad? The one who—" She looked at my scars and understood immediately. "Oh my goodness, we've been wondering about you for years." "Jake's told you about me?" I asked, surprised. "Are you kidding?" "Jake talks about his army buddies all the time, especially you. He never gave up hope of finding you." Lisa handed Jake a set of keys. "I brought the keys to truck number 2, and I called the bank. They're expecting you this afternoon to add someone to the accounts." Jake stood up and grabbed my arm gently. "Come on, partner. Let me show you your new truck." We walked outside into the cold December air, but I barely felt it. The red truck was beautiful, a Peterbilt with chrome that gleamed even in the gray winter light. "This is mine," I asked in disbelief. "Half mine, half yours," Jake said. "We're equal partners in Morris & Martinez Trucking." "Morris & Martinez," I repeated. "That's right. Your name goes on everything, the trucks, the business license, the bank accounts. You're not just an employee, Danny. You're my partner." I ran my hand along the side of the truck, hardly believing this was real. After years of having nothing, suddenly I had more than I'd ever dreamed of. "There's an apartment above the trucking office," Jake said. "It's not fancy, but it's warm and dry. You can stay there until you get back on your feet and find your own place." I started crying again, but these were different tears. For the first time in 7 years, they were tears of hope instead of despair. Back inside the diner, James was talking to Sarah about her nephew. "What's his name?" James asked. "Maybe I can offer him a job at my construction company." "His name is Michael," Sarah said, "but he's been turned down for so many jobs because of his record. He got arrested for fighting a few times when he was drinking. PTSD can make people angry," James said, showing how much he'd learned in just 1 hour. "Maybe what he needs is understanding, not judgment." Lisa was watching Jake and me through the window. "They look happy," she said to the people still in the diner. "They deserve to be happy," said the elderly woman who had defended me earlier. "After everything they've been through." James pulled out his phone and made a call. "Hi, this is James Patterson from Patterson Construction. I want to start a new hiring program for veterans. Yes, even ones with records, because they served our country and deserve a second chance." When we came back inside, Jake made an announcement to everyone. "I want to thank all of you for standing up for Danny today. You showed him the kindness that every veteran deserves." "What happens now?" asked Sarah. Jake smiled. "Now we get Danny's VA benefits straightened out. We get him the medical care he needs. We help him reconnect with his family. And we start building a business together. And I'm going to make sure my construction company hires more veterans," James added, starting with Sarah's nephew Michael. The transformation in the diner was amazing. What had started as a place of cruelty and humiliation had become a place of hope and healing. Strangers had become allies, and enemies had become friends. But the biggest change was in me. For the first time since Afghanistan, I felt like I had a future worth living. 6 months later, I was driving my red Peterbilt down Interstate 40, hauling a load of construction materials to Denver. The CB radio crackled to life, and I heard Jake's familiar voice from the truck behind me. "Hey, partner, you see that rest stop coming up? Let's grab some coffee and call it a day." "Copy that," I replied, smiling at how normal this had all become. Jake and I had been running routes together for months now, and the business was doing better than either of us had expected. We pulled into the truck stop and found a booth in the attached restaurant. Jake ordered his usual coffee and apple pie, while I got a burger and fries. I put on 20 pounds since that day at Murphy's Diner, and my clothes actually fit properly now. "That's a good news today," Jake said, pulling out his phone. "Lisa called while you were getting fuel. We just got approved for 3 more government contracts. Looks like we'll need to hire another driver soon." "That's great," I said. "Any thoughts on who?" "Actually, yeah. Remember James Patterson, the guy from the diner? He called yesterday. One of his veteran employees wants to get into trucking. James is willing to help pay for his CDL training." I shook my head in amazement. Hard to believe that's the same guy who was making fun of my scars 6 months ago. "People can change," Jake said. "Look at you. You're not the broken man I found in that diner anymore." He was right. The VA had finally approved my disability benefits after Jake helped me get a lawyer. I was getting treatment for my PTSD and depression. Most importantly, I had hope again. "Speaking of changes," I said, "I got a letter yesterday." I pulled an envelope from my jacket pocket. "It's from my sister Maria. She found me through the Red Cross website." Jake's eyes lit up. "She wants to see you. She's flying in from Mexico next week. She's bringing her kids, my niece and nephew that I've never met." I felt my voice getting thick with emotion. "She said she never stopped looking for me. She said Mom died 2 years ago, but she never gave up hope that I was alive somewhere." "Danny, that's incredible. There's more. Maria's husband owns a shipping company in Guadalajara. He wants to meet with us about running freight between Mexico and Texas. Could be huge for the business." Jake raised his coffee cup in a toast. "To second chances. To brothers who don't give up on each other," I replied, clinking my cup against his. As we sat there planning our next moves, I thought about that terrible morning in Murphy's Diner. If Jake hadn't been there, if he hadn't recognized me, if he hadn't spoken up, where would I be now? Probably still homeless, maybe worse. "Hey Jake, remember what you told James that day? About me taking shrapnel meant for you?" "I remember. I've been thinking about that. You were wrong about one thing." Jake looked confused. "What do you mean?" "You said I saved your life. But really, you saved mine. If you hadn't stood up for me that day, if you hadn't reminded me who I used to be, I don't think I would have made it much longer." Jake reached across the table and grabbed my hand. "We save each other, brother. That's what soldiers do." My phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Sarah, the waitress from Murphy's Diner. "Thought you'd want to know. Michael got promoted to foreman at Patterson Construction today. James says he's the best worker he's ever had." I showed the text to Jake, and we both smiled. The ripple effects from that one day kept spreading outward, touching more lives than we could have imagined. "You know what the best part is?" Jake said. "What's that?" "We're not done yet. Every veteran we hire, every person we help, every time we tell our story, it all matters. We're proving that nobody has to stay lost forever." As we got ready to leave the restaurant, a young waitress approached our table nervously. "Excuse me," she said. "I heard you two talking about being veterans. My brother just got back from deployment, and he's having a hard time adjusting. Do you have any advice?" Jake and I looked at each other and smiled. "Sit down," I said, gesturing to an empty chair. "We've got time." For the next hour, we talked to the waitress about her brother, about PTSD, about the resources available to help veterans transition back to civilian life. We gave her our business cards and told her to have her brother call us if he needed someone to talk to who understood what he was going through. When we finally got back to our trucks, the sun was setting over the mountains. The sky was painted in shades of orange and pink that reminded me of better days, of hope and possibility. "Ready to head home?" Jake asked over the CB radio. "Ready," I replied. As we pulled back onto the interstate, I thought about Tommy Rodriguez and the letter he'd written before he died. He'd call me an angel, but I knew the truth now. The real angels were people like Jake, who never gave up on lost souls like me. Angels were people like Sarah, who showed kindness to strangers. Angels were even people like James, who had the courage to change